What's up, ladies and gents? For those of you on the West Coast, good morning. And we're going to be talking to James about his platform, Matchmaker FM, how to get people on your show or how to be a guest on other people's show. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
The Business Bros Podcast was created for you. Learn from the business professionals who come to share their stories. Find out what's working in business, on social media, what's hot and what's not, straight from the mouths of successful entrepreneurs out there doing the real work. And now, welcome to another episode of
Business Bros. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm super pumped today. I got James Mulvany on the show today. Look, he's a serial entrepreneur, founder of radio.co, podcast.co, matchmaker.fm, which is the one we're going to be talking about. And he's helped me out, whether he knows it or not, to be working on my podcast tour, to be able to get onto 50 shows in the month of June. I haven't got quite to 50 yet, but I'm getting closer every single day. And I know those of you who are starting the podcast space are looking for people to have on your show. His platform is helping people do that, and I'm super pumped to have him on the show. So without further ado, James Mulvany, welcome to the program.
How's it going? Thanks for having me on, Hernan.
Of course. So tell me a little bit about, you have a bunch of different companies that you've started, a bunch of different platforms, all in the radio podcast space. Mm-hmm. How does one decide to go and get into that back end space versus just staying behind the mic?
Well, I mean, that's exactly interesting. You sort of staying behind the mic. That's firstly how I got into this space. I was like a 16-year-old kid. I wanted to go into radio as a DJ. I've always loved music. I've always loved broadcasting. And, kind of at the time, I was also learning how to build websites. And I was really interested in, how to make money on the internet. I was quite an entrepreneurial kid. So I thought to myself, well, could I sell services to this industry? I'm really interested in radio. Is there any opportunities here? Kind of didn't really know what I was doing, but I found someone who did, so who kind of knew all the servers and all that kind of stuff, partnered up with them and basically launched a website and started making some money pretty quickly. This was like 2004, 2005. So things have changed obviously significantly since then. And I just kind of never really left the industry. As I say, my first business was involved in radio and broadcasting. That was a service called Wave Streaming. I ran that for about 10 years. Then about 5 years ago, we transitioned. We kind of launched radio.co, which is more like a platform for radio stations. And then more recently, we've entered the podcasting market with podcast.co and matchmaker.fm. But, I think part of what appeals to me about this is just the ability to broadcast online. And of course, like we're doing now, we're live. The tools available to people now are just far, far better than they were like even 5 years ago. And you can do all sorts of stuff. I'm just sat here in my spare bedroom going live across the internet, and the fact that you can kind of collaborate and have guests on the stuff now just kind of makes it even more exciting, I think.
It totally does. Now, your platform has made that almost like a 10x. It's super simple to use. I've been using a couple different directories and different places where I meet other podcast space, other podcasters. So there's Facebook groups and there's there's other networking events, and you meet people as you go along. But your platform was designed really user friendly. I mean, it's super simple. There's not a lot of clutter. There's not, advertising space. All this. It's really just a place for podcasters to come meet each other, identify different show types, and connect. What's the idea behind? There's got to be a longer term play here. What's the idea behind it?
Yeah, I mean, so to give you some context to the background of how Matchmaker.fm came around, this time last year, we were launching our podcasting platform, podcast.co. We'd probably spent about a year leading up to it, kind of starting to establish the brand in the marketplace and also working on the software. And one of the things that we noticed was, obviously there's so many podcasts based on interviewing people, having guests on. And, I think it's about 60% in total of podcasts do. But there didn't seem to be like a really one kind of unified platform to connect people together. So at the beginning, it was really an idea. We thought of it as a marketing funnel to bring customers to podcast.co. And, it started out as just literally like a couple of Google forms. We put them up on the podcast.co site. saying, are you looking for better guests? Fill out this form if you're a podcaster. And then another form which said, if you're looking to be featured on more shows as a guest, fill out this form. And we noticed that pretty quickly these forms were being filled out. And it wasn't just like enter your name, enter your email address, send. It was, tell us about yourself. And people were kind of going to a great length to basically complete effectively like a profile on themselves. But we didn't actually have any way of connecting these two kind of groups together. So we then thought, well, there's obviously clearly a demand for this type of service. We sat down with our UI designer. We started working on some sort of designs, some wireframes for the product, kind of put it down on paper, so to speak. And interestingly, the first ever design, we kind of, for a joke, thought, well, it'd be cool if it was like Tinder. So we had like the sort of Tinder style swipe left, swipe right interface. And interestingly, when we then built the platform, we never built that. But I'm still one day I want to do that. I want to get the Tinder style thing going on. It's just because I think it would be funny and it would be a good marketing technique, But then we kind of started when we launched the software. We actually, we didn't get around to actually creating a platform till the end of 2019, and we launched it February this year. And it's just blowing up. We've got about 4,500 users. I think we just surpassed 4,500 users on the system, most of which are actually really engaged. And what's great to see is people are signing up and they're not just leaving their profiles empty. Like back in the day, used to have all the Twitter profiles with eggs on, which were just kind of empty profiles. People are actually spending time, creating good profiles and then actually using the platform to make connections. So that's kind of how it kind of was concepted and really how the product came to be. Now, when you say longer term game, there's two real strategies or three different things we're planning to do. First of all, it has been a great source of customers for podcast.co. So although we're not charging any money for the Matchmaker platform currently, it does pay for itself because we get people signing up to podcast.co. I think the two ways that we will look to monetize in future is, at some point we'll introduce a freemium model. So there'll always be a free option for both podcasters and guests. We might have a freemium option which introduces some premium features. And also the other way is introducing agency plans. We've had quite a few people who contact us who work on behalf of maybe, they might have a roster of public speakers that they represent or influencers that they represent. And they want to, they're a PR company, a marketing company, or influencer marketing company, and they want to represent people. So we'll probably introduce some agency type plans to Matchmaker as well.
That is super awesome because that is it's something that is a definite need in the space. There are agents out there that are doing that already for people, getting them on podcasts. And it's a difficult thing to kind of vet the guest that's going to be on the show. It's coming from an agent, and you kind of have this assumption that someone who hires an agent has a quality of a type of speaking style or an energy that they come on the show and they elevate the status. And that's just not always the case. Your platform allows us to not only see the person that we're going to be talking to, but kind of read a profile, do a Google search, get more information on these people and see who they are prior to being on the show, rather than just taking an agent's name, for granted. It's just something that comes on the show.
Do you know what? I think you make a really interesting point there, Hernan, as well, about the gauging the energy of a person, because that's quite important. I think, especially if you're trying to find guests for your podcast, you want to make sure that someone's kind of on the same level as you. You don't want to be like super hyped and then find someone who's really solemn and kind of boring and sort of corporate or whatever, and vice versa. Some podcasts are really serious and then I go on and I'm like, hey, and it's just kind of a bit like, whoa, who's this guy? So one of the features that we're actually looking to introduce, probably going to be rolling out within the next month or so, I think it's in the development roadmap at the moment, is video. So you can actually put a video on your profile, build it right into the system. And then also we'll add that to the messaging feature eventually as well. So you can actually send people video messages, pitch yourself or pitch for someone to come on your show, as a video. Because I just think, again, it adds that sort of extra element, as an extra kind of dynamic between people. And I think you can really see who someone is on a video versus just sort of reading a description of someone.
Oh, I 100% agree. So one of the cool things I like to do, so if I get a friend request on Facebook, I don't just hit accept. I have to send you a video DM Thank
Really?
you for that Facebook friend request. And I do that constantly. One of the main reasons is because once I send you this video message, I say your name on it. I tell you what date it is, all these different things to identify that's unique to you. It's not something I just pre-recorded and throw it out there. And so I send it, and people acknowledge that. I get interaction because of it. People are like, hey, that was amazing. I love that. I love what you're doing. And it sparks that conversation that the whole point of being on social media is to have a relationship with somebody else. It requires a dialogue at some point, right? Rather than just give them access. It's almost like, I feel like if somebody sends you a friend request and you say, yeah, cool, bling, you're literally just saying, here's my window, look into my life, and don't worry about ever connecting with me in any actual positive way. Just take a look at what I'm doing. I find that kind of weird, but if you engage with somebody, if they do see you on video, if they get that personality, then all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is somebody that I might actually want to hang out with or have a conversation with. And in this podcast space, that's vital, because you're exactly right. I've had people on the show, and here, I don't know, maybe you've had this experience. You talk to them prior to hitting the on switch, and they have all kinds of energy. They're ready to rock and roll. They're pumped. And as soon as you hit the on button, they shut down.
Really?
Have you had that before?
No, I mean, I don't know, maybe. I've definitely had it where it's interesting because, again, when you're sat interviewing someone, and obviously I have my own podcast and I've had my own live stream, which I think I mentioned to you before. But also, recently I've been on a tour, and this has been kind of a marketing exercise for Matchmaker, but also just a personal thing because, obviously we're in lockdown. I wouldn't normally have time to do this kind of thing when I'm in the office. There's too many distractions. So I've used the last sort of 30, 40 days to appear on as many podcasts as I can. So my challenge initially was 30 within 30 days, hit that challenge. And it's more, I'm kind of getting close to about 40 now. I think really like 35 or 36 days in, something like that. So it's been a real interesting experience, and just doing, that many podcasts in a kind of focused period of time. And of course, one of the reasons I want to do this is to get the word about matchmaker.fm out there as well. But, it certainly helps you with your communication skills. I think this is massively helpful. And of course, it's just like anything. The more you do, the better you become, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you are literally episode 489. If I was to go back to episode 1, it was horrible. There's no way. It doesn't sound good. I have zero energy behind my voice. I don't know really how the show flows or how to interview anybody, but it's something that we've developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of over time, I've read a statistic, number of different places. There are about 1 million podcasts, and half of them have 14 episodes or less.
Right.
I relate a lot of that to people's fear or maybe discouragement once they launch, that they have 0, 1, 2, 10 maybe downloads, and so they get discouraged. They feel like, I started my podcast, I'm the next Joe Rogan, here we go, and then nobody listens. There's a huge discouragement. Or they want to do interviews and they realize, I can't get anybody on my show, and I don't know what to do next, and they quit. What are you seeing with people on Matchmaker as far as once they create a profile for themselves and they start getting some guests, are the people on your show consistently staying on more than 14 episodes? Do you have that kind of metric?
That's a good question. One of the things that we're looking to improve is kind of what you call in the industry like gamification or gamification. So basically the ability to actually see, at the moment, you can message people directly, but we don't have a clear way of sort of defining this person has been on this show. That's something we'll be adding in future, which will give us much, much more accurate statistics and also not just for our own stats, but also for people using the platforms. They can say, oh, this person's been on that show. There's a link to that show where I can listen to them. So you can kind of, again, get a gauge for what the person sounds like, what they might, what areas of expertise they may have, etc. But one thing we do know is when I look at the graphs of, we have a great system called Redash, which basically pulls out loads of data from the database and draws lots of pretty graphs so we can kind of understand how the platform's being used. We are seeing usage going up in line with the number of users that are joining the platform. So it's not a case of, as I mentioned before, people are joining it and forgetting about it. Most people that are joining it are engaging, which is what we want to see. I think so. The average number of connection requests or messaging requests that people are sending is 7 a month at the moment, which is pretty good. I think that works out pretty well for most people. I guess that's on the basis that they might want to record 1 episode a week. So they maybe need to send 4 messages to get booked on 4 shows, 7 messages for 4 shows. I'm not exactly sure, but the statistics are certainly very promising. And also, I think when we start building out more and more functionality, such as the video and the kind of connection system I just mentioned, so we can start tracking that, usage will go up, and it'll be interesting to see how it pans out for sure.
Organization is key, and it's
Yes.
something that you don't really understand until you start implementing this type of strategy, right? So you did the 30 for 30. I don't know where I came up with a number, but I was gonna go ambitious, and I was gonna do 50 shows in June. I haven't gotten to 50. I've booked 22 so far, and growing. Using your platform has made it super easy to do that. But even then, like, I find it more difficult to be a guest on other shows than to get guests on my show. On your platform, it's super easy to it's literally like you activate your profile and people can see it, and they're like, they just send you, hey, here's somebody that I'm looking for. Are you guys thinking of any fine-tuned way for somebody looking to be a guest to have that kind of simple send out to people, let me be a guest on your show? I already see the platform as like, you literally have, there's 2 tabs and a message. Like, it's simple. I want to be a guest. But it's, finding somebody who's looking for that guest, or finding somebody who meets a certain niche, that can get a little difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, one of the things that we try and do when we onboard people to the platform is encourage people to be proactive, because, you can sign up, create a profile, and, sort of sit there and hope for the best. But ultimately, the people who are winning out on the platform are definitely the guys and the girls who are actually being proactive, sending messages out, trying to have those conversations. Again, I think there are 2 types of user. There are users who have podcasts, who will obviously have a profile for their podcast, and there are guest users. And then obviously there are lots of users who will have both their profile for themselves and also profile for their podcast. But then we are trying to balance that out. So we're trying to have a good selection of people who perhaps don't have a podcast, but they might be an expert in a certain field. They might be a marketing expert, or someone who's got expertise in finance or sports or whatever it might be. So really, again, it's just for us at the moment, about from the get-go, it's been about filling the platform with good quality people. So one of the conscious decisions we made when we started was to have it as a closed ecosystem. So you can't see, if you go on the website, it's just one page, right? And to actually, to go into the platform, you need to sign up and create an account, which has meant that we've ended up with a sort of a good quality group of users on there.
Being that you guys are in the podcast space, you get to communicate with a lot of podcasters. You have other industries who want to get into the podcasting space contacting you, whether it's they want to market on other people's shows, they're interested in the data and demographics of podcasting space. Where do you see this podcast trend going? I mean, it's already been here for a number of years. We've had major sellouts, like Joe Rogan's being able to go exclusive on Spotify. They're making big pushes to buy out, existing podcasts. What do you see? What's your kind of, sixth sense in what's going on?
That's a good question. And this is a question that lots of people have asked me recently. I think it's still just the beginning. If you compare the number of podcasts, you mentioned earlier, there's 1 million podcasts on Apple and Spotify, etc. And if you look at the number of Instagram accounts or YouTube channels, that number is still tiny. So it's a good thing, because it means if you're thinking about starting a podcast for your business or to grow your personal brand, or for any kind of commercial intention, there's still that ability to get cut through. And the chances are most of your competition still won't be really engaged in the medium. So, there's a good opportunity there. Whereas if you look at, any market, your competition's all over social media, for example, already. So it's just the way I look at it, particularly for businesses, it's just another thing to add to your marketing mix. So some people like to listen to podcasts because you can digest them passively. and you don't have to be sat there watching them like you would with a video. The other benefit is that it's statistically proven that you've got people's attention for a lot longer than you might do via video. So, people's attention span on social media sucks. It's like 30 seconds or something. Sometimes it can be even less than that if they're just scrolling through their feed. Whereas it's proven that about 70% of people who tune into a podcast episode will actually listen for the entire thing. Now, as marketers, having someone's attention for 30 minutes is really, really rare and very valuable, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
So it brings me to that next question: the ability for you to maintain that attention from your audience. Everybody wants to know that secret to having the kick-ass podcast, that one that everybody wants to dial into on a regular basis. And for me, I've never had an actual answer to, that I don't know, the elixir that gets you to that magic spot. For me, it's always been, be as consistent as possible. Post as much stuff, take your long form content, break it up into smaller pieces, put that on social media, grab as much attention, build your audience one person at a time, engage with people, and you'll grow over time. And that's my advice, but it's not the sexiest advice. It's my advice is you have to work at it.
It's hard work. It is. Yeah, I think, it's interesting because I don't think there is a secret sauce. Sometimes I think still, like, if you're starting now and don't give up after 14 episodes is probably tip number one. Get started is tip number two. Don't start thinking, but a lot of people we speak to at podcast.co, they've been thinking about starting a podcast for like 2 years or 2 months or whatever. Just start. You can reiterate and you can improve as time progresses. I saw your intro at the beginning of this show and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like Hollywood production, So I thought, it's one of these things, isn't it? Where, you start and it might not be perfect, but you've got to just start somewhere. But like the more you work at it, the better you become. Like you said earlier, if you're interviewing guests, you become a better interviewer as well. I think, try and be consistent with when and how often you're putting your episodes out. Be consistent with the length of them. And also, try and get a good quality of guest on your show as well, because then they'll share it with their networks too, which is, again, part of the value of having guests on. I think, that you can, if you're serious about it and you're a business and you have a budget, potentially spend on advertising to promote a show. I also think having a concept is really important. So too many people go into podcasting, especially if you're doing it for as part of a commercial entity. Don't just sort of start making up as you go along. You think about who your audience is, what you want to achieve from it. Is it an education piece for your customers? Is it to build leads? If so, how are you going to sort of measure your KPIs? Or is it for much bigger companies? We're seeing it used more and more for internal comms, stakeholder engagement, and that kind of thing. So I think, having a clear idea of why you're going into podcasting or what you're using it for is a good thing, and just trying to build a solid concept that is going to appeal to your market, because just having your company podcast isn't necessarily going to be good enough. I think, having a sort of theme to it, or solving a specific problem in your market is always a good way to go, because again, people are thirsty for information, aren't they?
That thinking about what it is and who your ideal client is and who your ideal customer is, a lot of times I find with people who are just getting started, that's too in-depth, right? For the commercial side, definitely you should have a good indication of who your ideal client is. But there's a lot of people who just want to get started. And my advice to them is similar to yours. It's just get started. This is the beautiful thing about having your own show, is you can modify, change, adapt. You can rebrand at any time, and no one is going to be there to stop you, to prevent you, to change you from doing that. And you can adapt your show, as you go along. In our show, we're starting to add segments because, and it's to simplify certain things. I mentioned that I take our long form content and I chop it up into smaller pieces and repurpose it onto social media. Well, the fact that I go back and listen to the show to find those little nuggets, that's a time-consuming process. It's a great process. You should be doing that. But what we're starting to add is different segments, like the one I'm about to drop right now. And the whole reason is, now when I'm scanning through my video, as I'm looking through the show, I can easily identify the segment, cut it out, and repurpose it in a simple form. Plus, it's a little fun. So let's jump into our segment here. All right, 2 truths and a lie. Here we go, James. You ready?
2 truths and a lie. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So simple rules. You're going to tell me 2 truths, 1 lie. Don't tell me which one's which, and I'm going to try to guess which one was the lie.
How do people normally do this? Do they normally just try and be completely poker face? Or
Complete poker face. Complete poker face. Here you go.
So 2 truths and a lie. Here we go. Number 1, my first business was washing cars. Number 2, I've never actually had a job working for anyone else. And number 3, my favorite color is blue.
That's a tough one. Okay, so I'm gonna say your favorite color is blue because you're wearing a blue shirt. That's gotta be a truth, right?
That's correct.
Never had a job. You are a serial entrepreneur. That's probably highly likely. And I'm gonna say that your first business was not a car wash, since everything you've done has been tech space related. So I'm gonna go with the car wash is a lie.
That's correct. Well done. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm getting rock and roll. Try to pay attention to those details. So, all right, tell me a little bit about the true truth. So we got the blue shirt, right? Definitely blue's your favorite color. I haven't seen that on your website. That's more like a purplish orange. So I'm assuming you actually did some background and decided on what your customers would appeal to.
That's a good question. I don't really know, to be honest. I should know the answer to that. I think so. Podcast.co is orange, like the main color theme. Although we're kind of sort of moving away from that now. I think we're going to rebrand soon to make it feel a little bit more grown up. Matchmaker's purple and orange. Really, why we chose those colors, I don't know. It was probably something our designer looked into. The guy who worked on a guy called Marlon, who was working on the branding for us at the time. So I'm not sure. My favorite color is blue. I don't necessarily feel like you have to have your business branded to the same color as you, but that's just it's one of those sort of trivial facts that I thought, well, it could easily just be anything.
It could have been anything except you were wearing blue, so that threw you off. What was your other truth? What was the second one?
I've never had a job ever.
Never had a job. So when you talk to somebody who has been in their own business, who has developed their own income stream, oftentimes they've never had their own W-2 income. How, was this something that it's just you, since you were a kid, you found like, I'd rather go make my own money than work for somebody? Or do you have like authority issues, or like what's the deal with never having a job?
I think it was, well, there's a couple of reasons, right? There's firstly, and this is kind of why I thought also I'd throw in the one about washing cars, because a lot of entrepreneurs will always start with something like that, they sell lemonade or they wash cars or they, I don't know, whatever, do something like that. So I kind of thought it might be plausible that that's also true, but that was not true. I used to wash my dad's car for him, but I didn't get paid. No, I think the reason I never had a job, so my dad was great. When I was growing up, he always said to me, the best decision he ever made was going self-employed, starting his business. Now, he was in a completely different industry than I've been in. He was an antiques dealer. He bought and sold furniture. But he used to always say, before like I was born, he had so many different jobs throughout his life. He worked in insurance sales, and he worked in a casino, and he did this, and he kind of just never really found a sort of, I guess, a kind of true calling in terms of his occupation. But he did always say, starting my antiques business was always the best decision, because it's just given me so much freedom. And, when I was growing up, I lived near London, and most of my other friends had dads who lived very corporate lives. So they were working in London, commuting back home, and they quite often wouldn't see their kids much during the week. They wouldn't be getting back till 10, 11 at night. And, my dad was always there. If he needed to, if we fell ill in the middle of school, he could come and pick us up. And, he had that freedom, whereas a lot of the other parents didn't. And he just always sort of said that to me. So I think naturally, when it got to a stage where I was 15, 16, I was learning how to use a computer, and I just had this fascination with building websites. And I was teaching myself that stuff anyway. And I kind of guess I put 2 and 2 together and thought, well, my friends are now starting to go and get part-time jobs working in McDonald's and doing paper rounds and that sort of thing, which is nothing wrong with that. But I thought, well, I don't really want to do that. So can I make some money on the side, with these skills that I've learned? So I started designing logos for people and those little annoying flashing banners. I had a website selling those back in like 2003. And that was it. I kind of started, I guess, my first ever business, and I didn't ever have to go and get a part-time job. I then did decide I wanted to go off to university, so I did that. But then I used that sort of 4-year period while I was at uni to sort of grow a business, which meant when I had graduated, I didn't actually need to go and work for anyone. And I had a website which was probably making about 10 grand a month by that stage. So yeah, serious money. And that's kind of, the rest is history, as they say.
Now, when you took those skills, your dad was a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, doing it himself. You didn't take that approach. You mentioned earlier today that when you started, Matchmaker and all these, your other websites, you mentioned a team. It was subtle, but you mentioned a team. That is something that an entrepreneur usually develops over time, the ability to scale a business, to grow something beyond themselves, to understand their limits to their skills and bring on other people. How valuable has that been to the growth of the platforms that you've developed?
Yeah, I'd say really valuable. And again, that's one of the things I remember noticing about my dad when I was growing up is, he did a lot of everything himself. And I used to say to him, why don't you hire staff? And his answer was always, well, staff cost money. Okay, now this is true. Staff do cost money. But, the way what I didn't understand was, well, yes, it does. But then you can hire someone to do stuff that you don't really want to do, like sort of being the shopkeeper, for example. And then you can go off and do the other things that you're really good at, which my dad was good at, like doing the deals and all that sort of thing, And, he still did pretty well, and he's retired now. But like, I always looked at that and thought, why don't you just get someone? Because he'd sit there, come home and complain that he'd sat there all day and he didn't really feel like he was achieving. So I was like, as soon as I could hire people, probably about a year after I graduated university, that was one of my first goals, is like, I need to take someone on. And of course, as soon as I did, I took someone on first of all to handle like customer services and that sort of thing, and then I hired shortly after a programmer. And at the time, I'd learned to code myself. And when I hired a programmer, I realized that I was rubbish at writing code, and this guy was way better than me. And I used to think I was quite good before that, So ever since then, I've been very, very people focused in terms of we've got a team of about 34 now. And most are based here in Manchester, but we also have a few remote workers, a couple in the USA and one in Canada. And, it's been really valuable over the sort of past, well, I think it was about 10 years ago when I took on my first ever member of staff now. And, since then, obviously, whenever I launch a project now, I'm looking at the bigger picture versus actually doing a lot of the work myself. So it's a good position to be in, but also as well, it's a lot of responsibility as well. So it's kind of, I agree, as an entrepreneur, you start out, and I worked on my own for probably 5 years before I hired anyone, and I was wearing many hats. I was the customer support guy, I was the tech guy, I was writing the code, I was designing a website, I was, dealing with sales and support. And it's just, you can kind of be not very good at a lot of things. So, I think it's good when you start hiring people and you're like, wow, this guy or this girl blows me out of the water of what I was doing before. That's a really good feeling. You want to always be recruiting people who are way better than you.
And you've done a tremendous job building some of the greatest platforms I've seen. Again, I want to thank you for your time coming on the show. Matchmaker FM has made things for me very easy. It's only getting started. So all the additional things that you talked about today that you're adding to the platform are just going to make it so much better for podcasters to be able to grow, to having a set schedule and being committed to somebody else is one of the reasons why I continue to do this on a regular basis. Our calendar is booked up with guests up to 8 weeks in advance, people that want to be on the show. And it's awesome to have that. But at the same time, those days that you don't feel like doing it, you have to, because there's somebody who's waiting there to be on your show, to promote their product or service or whatever it is. You guys are giving us the ability to make podcasting a lifestyle which will push you beyond those 14 episodes. So, thank you again for everything that you guys have put together and for coming on the show and sharing with it. And just so you know, I preach to people about Matchmaker FM because it's that good of a product. So when, I do a lot of different coaching to help people get their podcast started. And this is one of those things that I'm like, this is where you need to go. There's Anchor FM for a free platform to get your hosting done. There's a bunch of different stuff that you can do to, start podcasting at $0 and then add to it as you get into the groove of things. Then where you want to spend your money to improve your platforms. And your platform is one of those places where it's on the top of my list of things that I recommend to people. So thank you very much for putting that out there.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks very much for having me on today, Hernan. It's been a great pleasure and really interesting conversation as well.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gents, make sure you guys go check out matchmaker.fm. I'm telling you, you'll love it. If you don't have a podcast, but you want to get on a podcast, get on there anyways. If you have a business, you want to talk about your business product or service, things that you're doing for your community, check it out, get a profile, get yourself squared away. Matchmaker.fm. James, thank you for coming on the show. Have a great rest of your, it's still Wednesday over there, right?
Yeah, still Wednesday. Yeah. End of the day now, but thanks very much, Hernan. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. All right, ladies and gents, that's all we got for you guys today. Well, that's not true. We got a few more shows for you later today. Peace. And we're out. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm running the whole thing by myself today. Outro.
Thank you for listening to the Business Bros Podcast. Are you looking to get more clients or to increase your income? Hernan, the Business Bro, can help you generate referrals through the power of podcasting. And James, the Insurance Bro with Pipeline Insurance, can help you effectively add insurance to your existing business. If you are ready to create wealth today and generational wealth for tomorrow, email businessbros@csfirst.com to schedule a free consultation. Or join the Business Bros Network, www.businessbros.biz.